Hey, it's Stace here from Sacred Art and Story, and I thought I would share a little bit about the process of making a doll kind of like this. And when I start to teach people about making dolls, a lot of times what happens is people think, well, I need to know exactly what I'm going to do beforehand, like who is this doll and what it's about, and all the things. And I always say, I kind of hope you don't. I kind of hope you don't know any of that. And I start to share a little bit about the process that I like to go through, which is that I never know what I'm going to do before I get started. I love the idea of creating a doll and letting the process of creation help you to discover what's going on within you so that as you're making a doll, you start to recognize maybe the ideas behind it, you kind of apply meaning to the doll in some way. Maybe the face starts to show you something or the posture starts to show you something. And all of a sudden you start to tell a story about this doll, but then you realize there's some part of that story that really is your story too. And so I just thought would kind of talk about this because the interesting thing for me is like when I'm teaching a class, the people who come in and kind of say, well, I want to make a doll like this and I want her to look like this and I want it to be about this, often kind of struggle a little bit more with the whole process than people who sort of show up and are like, I've never done this before and I'm just going to see what happens. And I think really what it is that there's sort of a different connection to the process. There's sort of this desire, to sort of control it a little bit, which gets in the way, for people who kind of come in knowing all the details. And then the people who are kind of like, I'm just going to go with it. They often feel like there's this emotional connection to what they're doing, and they're listening and they're following and they're seeing something unfold that often has a lot more kind of emotional punch to them at the end of the day when they see their doll. And I just find that fascinating. And I love it because that's really how I like to work too. So I thought I would just kind of talk about this because when I get started, I love to start with a face and I just kind of start making something, and I don't think of myself as a sculptor. I've shown videos here on this channel, and this is how I do it in my classes where we start with a molded face and then work from there. And sometimes I'll do that, but sometimes I'll just kind of start with a chunk of clay and see what happens. And I just kind of play. I feel like we often create faces that sort of look like us. And so mine always have big cheeks and they sort of have sort of a style to them, right? But I just kind of let my hands do their thing and I start thinking about whatever's on my mind. And that's when I usually start to notice that it's almost like what's in my psychic space, like what's in the room, kind of starts to show up on the face. So I make a face and I usually let it dry and I might add more clay onto it later. And then I start to kind of, combine the armature, the wire or whatever I'm using, and I put the head on and I kind of work on hands and all the bits. So I get the body and then I start to play around with kind of like what poses feel right. Before I even start thinking of clothing and hair, I just start to see like, how does this doll want to be, and what does that start to tell me? Then I start to work on clothes after that, and then hair after that, and then all the little bits and bobs. But it is not unusual for me to take a face off, take a head off, change everything around in the process because something doesn't feel right. Or maybe I'm seeing a pose and then I realize, well, that pose feels right. It's telling the story that seems to fit with what's going on within me. And the face isn't right, so I change things up. So this doll right here, she had a different head for a while. She actually had a different body for a while. She was sitting and then I realized I really wanted her arms to be that, like there was something about her kind of reclining like this, right? And so I knew she needed a little bit longer body and longer legs because she just needed to stretch out. And I'm just not afraid to kind of stop and keep working on that, to follow the story, right? To follow the inner impulse that's sort of coming through, and then allowing something to change with the doll so that it really does start to reflect or sort of manifest, I guess, like the ideas that are sort of within me. And I love to teach people that way because something really magical happens when you create a doll in that way. Because the doll, the face, the body, the everything really does reflect something back to you that then you can start to make connections around. You start to apply meaning, you tell yourself stories, you see something in the doll that reflects something in you, or maybe you just realize that there's some story here that maybe you need to step into more. So this is what we are going to be doing in a class that's coming up that I do want to tell you about, which is the online Equinox Spirit Doll course. It starts September 13th, and we're going to be working for 5 Sundays, making a doll like this, right? And just kind of going through nice and slow, where I teach you how to create a face and a body, and you get to play around with all the different ways that it might start to evolve and show you what you want. But we're really starting with this idea that the equinox might have a message for you. And you don't need to know what it is, but maybe what you create is going to be the thing that helps you to recognize what's available for you this season. And I love this idea because I love to kind of create something that's going to mark the occasion. But I really love to come into it without knowing what's going to happen and being delighted when the result shows me something that feels really, really important. And that's how we're going to play this time around. So I'll put some details about it in the notes and the comments and everything below so you can check it out, and I hope you'll join us. But yeah, maybe think about the next thing that you want to create too, and just being like, hey, maybe you don't know what it's all about yet. Just start, see what happens.